Hello, my name is Christopher Renstrom. I'm the creator of rulingplanets.com and Christopher Renstrom Astrology. And this week, I wanted to talk to you about Pluto entering the Zodiac sign of Aquarius on November 19th. Now, Pluto did enter the Zodiac sign of Aquarius earlier this year in January 2024. But no sooner did it enter the Zodiac sign of the water bearer than it turned retrograde and re-entered the Zodiac sign of Capricorn. So now, we astrologers can say Pluto is finally entering the Zodiac sign of Aquarius on November 19th. Pluto is a modern planet. It's, in fact, the third or the last of the three modern planets. The modern planets in astrology are Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. And the reason why they are called the modern planets is that they were discovered after 1781, which is generally considered to be the modern age. Uranus was discovered in 1781, Neptune was discovered in 1846, and Pluto was discovered in the year 1930, the midpoint between the beginning of World War I and the end of World War II. Now, Pluto has a very serious and one might even say a rather dark reputation in astrology. It is the last of the planets that orbit the sun, and it is the last planet to enter into the pantheon proper of astrology. Pluto is named after the Roman god of the dead, who is derived from the Greek deity Hades. And so, by being the ruler of the dead, you could already see where Pluto might have a bit of an ominous reputation. Pluto was the ruler of the underworld, which is, of course, where souls went after they died. But the underworld also ruled over great riches, like gold and silver and precious metals. Even black gold, which we call oil, is mined from beneath the surface of the earth. The underworld was that shadowy realm that existed beneath the surface of the earth, so that when you died, your soul departed and descended down into the realm of Pluto, where it would be judged as to whether it was a good soul or a bad soul. If it was a good soul, it went to the Elysian fields and was celebrated in the afterlife. And if it was a bad soul, it was thrown into the belching pits of Tartarus, where it was tormented for all the rest of eternity. So Pluto had a bit of a fearsome reputation, not only because of its association with death, but also its association with damnation after death, with the idea of eternal damnation. So these elements, these themes are all wrapped up with the planet Pluto. Now, that doesn't mean that the planet Pluto resides like some sort of marvelous hellhound in your horoscope, and that it's ready to go and accuse you of all these horrible things that you do in your life. What Pluto represents is essentially your seed self. It's your core self. And the best way to sort of think of Pluto in this regard is as the dark sun. In astrology, we have two suns. There's the sun that the planets orbit, the sun that appears in the daytime sky and rises up to noon and then descends down into sunset at the end of the day. And that sun is an energy that brings heat and light to an astrological chart, just like it brings heat and light to the world that we live in. And so the sun is essentially what we aspire towards being. It is what we identify with as being the highest or the truest aspect of ourselves. And it is the nature of the sun in an astrological chart to not only provide an identity, we identify with our sun sign, but it's also aspirational because of the way that it rises up into the sky to reach its noon point zenith in the day. The dark sun, you can think of being the molten core of the earth. And indeed, the temperature of the molten core of the earth is the same exact temperature as the surface of the sun. So where the sun rises up in the sky, and this is something that we aspire to be, Pluto represents that dark sun within, that molten core of each one of us. It's what I often like to refer to as the seed self, borrowing that term from the wonderful 20th century astrologer Dane Bridger. And the seed self is essentially, well, think of a seed that's been planted in the ground. Think of a seed that's been planted in the soil. It lingers there in the dark, and hopefully when the sun comes around in the spring, it will sprout and grow. But sometimes seeds can hang out buried in the earth for long periods of time. So the seed self is basically the core self of you. It's almost your starting point. We can think of Pluto as representing things like our gut feeling about things, our deepest instinct, or our deepest instinctual sense of who we are. But Pluto in an astrological chart also represents the will to live. It is that energy in ourselves that will persevere, that will fight to live no matter what. Pluto is a stronger force of life. It's a stronger life force is probably the best way of putting it. It strives to live. It strives to grow, just like a seed in the darkness will sprout and move towards the surface and strive to grow as well. Okay, so this is basically Pluto's power in an astrological chart. So when Pluto enters a zodiac sign, when it changes signs, it's something that's very rare. Pluto can spend anywhere from 12 to 32 years traveling through just one zodiac sign. So when Pluto enters a sign, it essentially represents the core meaning of that sign. You could almost say it represents the gestalt of that sign, its truest essence. Its truest essence that's usually buried down inside the person. It's the way that we will grow in our life that might have nothing to do with what we set our sights on. You know, we might have been raised in a family or culture that said, you need to grow up and do this and that and the other thing. But Pluto will go its own way. It will stubbornly go its own way because it's being true to a deeper sense of who you are, to a more buried inside identity that is pushing up out of the soil and growing into the light. Okay, so this is what Pluto can represent in an astrological chart. Oftentimes we'll hear the phrase that Pluto is the planet of transformation. I have found that Pluto is actually the planet of ordeals and the transformations that arise from them. What that means essentially is that when Pluto enters your sign, you will sort of begin a descent down into the underworld of that particular sign. Now, I'm sure that there are many Capricorns out there who can share with all of us their adventure into the underworld of their sign that they went through from the year 2009 to just this year, 2024. That's because Pluto was in the zodiac sign of Capricorn, and many Capricorns went through this adventure where the things in their life stopped making sense. They might have unraveled, or they might have fallen apart, or there might have been loss or separation. And so there was a descent down into the underworld of themselves where they maybe felt very alone or very isolated or struggled against a formidable force. But from that struggle came something that triggered the life force in them. It's the ordeal. It's the going down into the underworld that actually triggers the next stage of the evolution. This isn't the same as Mars. Mars is like, here's a challenge and I need to tackle it. I need to take it on. I need to prove my mettle. Pluto is almost kind of like a calling from life to descend down into the true core of your being, of who you are, to touch base with parts of yourself you may not have known about before, with strengths you didn't know you had, with resources you didn't recognize, with talents and abilities that had gone unrecognized or unappreciated. And Pluto would have connected you to that force and brought that force so that it pushed you back up into the upper world again, so that you are in essence reborn as a result. And so this is why Pluto is also associated with rebirth. Circling back to talk about the seed, the idea of reincarnation is something that was espoused as a belief, religious belief, in societies that were essentially agricultural. In these societies, you would plant a seed in the spring and it would grow in the summer, and maybe you would harvest your fruits or vegetables or your foodstuff or maybe a lovely bouquet of flowers. And at the time that the sun moved into autumn and all of that abundance of summer died, it fell away, there was this feeling that things were going down into the earth again. Some people even plant seeds in the autumn. But whatever flower sprung to life, when it died and wilted, it left seeds, and those seeds fell down into the soil so that when the sun returned again in the following spring, there was life that sprouted from those seeds to beget new life. And so the idea of reincarnation, that, we live a life and that we return to the earth, we are buried in the earth, we end our life, but then we come back again. Well, this was just like the seeds. The fruits and the vegetables may die as we went into autumn. There was a hibernating period, but then they came back in the spring. And this was seen as a wheel of reincarnation. And this was adopted by many agricultural societies in their pantheon of gods and in their religious beliefs. So Pluto has this association with reincarnation. Certainly in some astrological schools, it's associated with reincarnation. One of them that comes to mind is evolutionary astrology, but also the idea of something being passed down through the generations, an intergenerational karma, an intergenerational destiny, an intergenerational bond. These things are also associated to the planet Pluto. But when Pluto enters a sign, as I said, what it does is that it really brings out the core being of what that astrological sign is going to do. Pluto, if it's transiting an important part in your own astrological chart, it gets you to pull up the floorboards of your horoscope. And as you pull up the floorboards of your horoscope and you look at parts of your horoscope that you aren't familiar with or where you haven't explored before, it gets you to ask a question. It gets you to ask a question about what's buried down in your horoscope. And are you going to discover buried treasure, or are you going to discover rot? Now let's go ahead and take a look at the zodiac sign Aquarius. Aquarius is an air sign, all right? A lot of times people think that Aquarius is a water sign because it's got those squiggly lines, but Aquarius is an air sign. Aquarius is a winter sign. And if you look at the winter signs, Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces, you will see very powerful water motif. Capricorn will be the goat with the fish tail. Aquarius is some fellow pouring water out of an enormous jug. And Pisces are the two fish who are swimming around in a circle. And the reason why I say Northern Hemisphere is because astrology was created here in the Northern Hemisphere. It originates either in the Mideast or there's an earlier version that originates in China. But these are Northern Hemisphere countries. The zodiac signs, the temperament and character of the zodiac signs are very much entwined with the seasons. And so the winter signs, Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces, are winter because this is the wet season. This is where there is an abundance of water. And so with Aquarius being an air sign, the clue here is that Aquarius is the sign of the water bearer. What that was in reference to is before we had pipes and plumbing, and it exists still in some societies today, you had to go to a well, put in a bucket or a jug, fill it with water, and carry it back to your household. And so that essentially was the water bearer, the person who carried the water from the wellspring or the well back to the household. When we remember that Aquarius is an air sign, in the winter, we have clouds, and clouds gather water. Water evaporates and creates clouds in our atmosphere. And when they become heavily laden, they rain. The water leaves the air and it rains down upon the plains and the countryside underneath. So this is why Aquarius is the water bearer. And this is why it's associated with air, because it basically represents clouds that are carrying water and then dispersing it to the different places where it decides to rain. All of the air signs, and the air signs are Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius. All of the air signs are very much associated with relationships in astrology. Gemini, the zodiac sign of the twins, talks about sibling relationships, which are our earliest experience of a relationship that we have in our lives. We may have a sibling that we grew up with, and a sibling is who you told your secrets to, and a sibling is who you tattled on, and a sibling is who you got into horrible fights with, and a sibling was also who you went to when you needed to divulge something that you couldn't tell mom or dad. And if you didn't have a sibling in your family, chances are there was a next-door neighbor or a playmate. So essentially, Gemini is sibling relationships, or a relationship with a contemporary, someone your age, a peer, for lack of a better way of putting it. And so sibling relationships are the most intimate and very close when you're getting along. All of this is to say is that Gemini is the most intimate of all the air signs. As we get into the other two air signs, there's a kind of coolness or a distance that presents itself in the sign itself. So Gemini is sibling relationships. Libra was spousal relationships, meaning you married someone outside your family. So Gemini would be relationships in the family. It's a sibling. Libra is you marry someone outside the family. And so it's more civic, it's more public, and it's the joining together of two people who are joined by a contract, a marriage license, for instance, an agreement that you are married. So it's different from blood ties in a family. It's more formal. This idea of a partnership with Libra. And Libra is all about the partnership. One person who is partnered with another person, and then they create a third entity, which is the partnership itself. When we get to Aquarius, Aquarius being the last of the three air signs, a word that's often used with Aquarius is the collective. Aquarius is really a little bit more than that. It is the person within the group. So there is this feeling that you are in a larger group of people, and where do you stand in that group? You know, where are you in the hierarchy? Are you in the upper echelon? Are you in the lower echelon? Are you someone that people are going to listen to? Are you a face in the crowd? Do you feel anonymous and unrecognized? So Aquarius really talks about how we behave in society. It's how we behave in a group in society. And in society, there's more of an emphasis on rules and laws. All air signs are law and order signs, even Gemini, because Gemini likes to familiarize themselves with the rules so that they know which ones they can bend and how much they can push something and get away with something. But law and order, rules and laws are pretty much espoused by the air signs. And with the Aquarius, the important thing is the collective. Basically, a cardinal virtue of an Aquarian is the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. So answering to the greater group is much more important than following what my own personal or even selfish needs may be. So Aquarius feels duty-bound to take into consideration everyone involved in a conversation. They feel duty-bound to take into consideration everyone involved in a group. Everyone needs to be heard, but at the same time, there needs to be a consensus. There needs to be a group agreement that exists. And this is going to be very important to an Aquarius. They will suspend their own personal needs and wants and do what's best for everyone involved, whether it's a group of 10 people or an entire nation. This is the way that an Aquarius thinks. Now, what's fascinating about Aquarius is that for an air sign, which is all about relationships, and an air sign that's so identified with a group, everyone belonging and feeling like they fit in, like everyone has a voice, everyone's being listened to, Aquarians often feel like they don't belong to the group. They always feel like an outsider to some degree. And Aquarius can go and start their own club, and everyone might join it just to be like in the same club as the Aquarius. And within weeks, they'll soon feel like they don't belong in this club anymore, that it's not theirs, that they don't feel like they fit in, that it's taken on a life of its own. So Aquarians have this very strange outsider status which is wound up or blended in, mixed up in a sign that very much seeks society. It seeks relationships, but it always feels apart in some way. It always feels like it doesn't belong. A big reason for this is because Aquarius has two ruling planets, Saturn and Uranus. Now, the way that I work with a ruling planet is a bit different from the way that other astrologers work with a ruling planet. For other astrologers, a ruling planet might be the ruler of the ascendant, it might be the final dispositor, it may be the ruler of the chart itself. To me, though, the ruling planet is simply the planet that rules your sun sign. It's as simple as that. If you are born under Leo, that's your sun sign, you're ruled by the sun. Okay, but let's say you're born under Gemini or Virgo. These are two zodiac signs that are ruled by Mercury, the planet of the mind. So the ruling planet, if you're born under Gemini and Virgo, is going to be Mercury. Now, to me, a ruling planet is like your patron saint, your den mother, your corporate sponsor, and life coach, all wrapped up into one. In other words, your ruling planet is always looking out after you in the sky. It's always looking out after you in an astrological chart, where a planet like, let's say, I don't know, Saturn or Pluto, let's go with those two, where they might be regarded as being very difficult. And people might say, ooh, Saturn, Pluto, these planets make me uneasy. These planets, they're connected with bad fortune, right? They bring difficult and horrible things. Where these planets might be experienced as being challenging for other zodiac signs, if you are born under Saturn, i.e. you're a Capricorn or Aquarius, or you're born under Pluto, the modern ruler of Scorpio, these planets become your champions. These planets are the planets that look out after you. Now, their expression of love might be along the lines of tough love, but it's still love of the sorts, and they will still be your patron. They will still be your protector. They will still be your benefactor. Now, when we had the introduction of the modern planets into the astrological pantheon beginning in 1781, with the discovery of Uranus, these planets paired off with ancient or traditional planets. And what they did is that they started with the outermost traditional planet, and that was Saturn. Saturn was the furthest planet away from the sun, and they paired Uranus with it. Saturn is the traditional ruler, Uranus is the modern ruler, but they both rule together. There are only two other zodiac signs who have that unique standing in astrology, and they are Pisces, which is Jupiter and Neptune. Jupiter is the traditional ruler, Neptune the modern ruler, and Scorpio, where Mars is the traditional ruler and Pluto is the modern ruler. The modern planet doesn't supersede the traditional planet. Rather, they work together, like a digraph. I don't know if you're familiar with the term digraph, but a digraph is when two letters come together to create a particular and unique sound. Like, for instance, you take the letter C and you take the letter H and you put them together and you make ch, okay? So where C would be k or s, and H would be p. You put them together and you get ch for chair or choose or choo-choo. T and H come together to make th for thought, think, that's, there. So a digraph is two letters coming together to create a unique sound that you can't get through any other combination. And that's basically how these two planets work with a zodiac sign like Aquarius. So if you're born under Aquarius, you have to honor both Saturn and Uranus. If you're born under Pisces, you have to honor Jupiter and Neptune. If you're born under Scorpio, you have to honor Mars and Pluto. Now, some of these are easier to honor than others. Like, for instance, if you're born under Scorpio and you honor Mars and Pluto, that's not really a conflict of interest there. I mean, in fact, these two planets have a lot of similarities. They're very much about fighting for life and death stakes and being very, very intense about what they take on. They're really survival of the fittest. But, for instance, you can take Mars as Eros and Pluto as Thanatos. So you get like a spring feeling with the Eros and you get an autumnal feeling with Thanatos. And so these ideas beginning and end come together with that combination. That doesn't seem very contradictory, right? If you look at Pisces, Jupiter and Neptune, these are the two storm gods in Roman mythology, coming from the Greek, which was Zeus and Poseidon. And they were brother gods. Zeus was sky, Poseidon was ocean, like Jupiter's sky, Neptune is ocean. And we all know that water evaporates from the ocean, goes into the sky, creates clouds, comes back as rain, and that's the water cycle right there. So those two ruling planets for Pisces are very complementary, you know. This is not the case for Aquarians. What you have with the two rulers of Saturn and Uranus is the most antagonistic relationship you could possibly have between two planets, all right? These also happen to be Aquarius's ruling planets. And the reason it's antagonistic is because Uranus, who's basically the first god, the first entity, and who represented the universe, makes love to Gaia, who has children. Uranus finds them repulsive. Gaia's like, why do you find them repulsive? And Uranus is like, they just are. And so Uranus becomes a very suffocating presence to Gaia in the early Greek myth. And so Gaia asks one of her children, Saturn, to go and castrate and overthrow Uranus, which Saturn does. And Saturn pushes apart sky from earth. Saturn, if you remember the Greek name Chronos, time, separates eternity, sky, from earth, the mortal coil, and separates the two from each other. So essentially what you have is this castrating action that Saturn takes against his father. We call it nowadays revolt or overthrow. He also separates eternity, Uranus, from mortality, a world where things are born, grow, and die. That's represented by Gaia. Saturn separates the two from each other and is the embodiment of time itself. So there's already this antagonistic relationship between Saturn and Uranus. Saturn is the usurper. Saturn is the one who overthrows his father. But it goes a little deeper than that in order to understand the character of Aquarius. Saturn, in mythology, in Greek mythology, but becomes much more pronounced in Roman mythology, was associated with the Golden Age. In other words, when Saturn usurps, castrates, overthrows his father Uranus, and becomes king of the gods, it's prophesied that he himself will be overthrown one day. And in order to forestall that, he eats every one of his children as soon as they're born, and he pops them almost like Pez candy or something, and they go on down to the stomach and languish there in this timeless place inside the belly of the god, inside the belly of Saturn. And during this period of time, time stood still. This is how the Romans tell it. It's borrowed from Hesiod, but it's really embellished by Ovid, the Roman poet Ovid, in his Metamorphoses. What happened is that when the children of Saturn were swallowed, they entered into a timeless limbo. And so time stopped on the planet Earth. This was seen as a golden age. This is the golden age that everyone is talking about, when time stood still, when there was no want, when there was no retaliation, no revenge, there was no war, there was no peace. It was idyllic. There were no moats or walls around castles, no fortresses that needed defending. There was no land that people envied and wanted to take over. There were no judges that people looked up to in supplication, have mercy on me. And they would say, no, I won't. And, off to prison with you. There was none of that. There was no rich. There was no poor. The earth gave its fruits freely. There was no toil. The earth just sort of like spontaneously produced fruits and vegetables and wheat and grain. And there was honey and there was milk and everyone was happy. All right. Everyone was happy in this golden age, in this age where Saturn, whose Greek name is Chronos, stopped time and stopped time successfully. And so this was seen as the golden age. This was seen as paradise. Well, as prophesied, Saturn is overthrown by one of his children. He's overthrown by Jupiter. Jupiter comes and overthrows his father. And according to Ovid, that is when the Silver Age begins. With every succeeding age that followed the Golden Age, it's been a degradation. Yeah, you went from gold to silver to, I don't know, bronze or copper or something. Nowadays, I guess we're in the age of plastic. But anyway, there was this degradation. The world got worse once Saturn had been overthrown and Jupiter had forced Saturn to vomit up the children and the other gods. He created Olympus, but it wasn't as majestic. It wasn't as beautiful as the golden age of Saturn. This is why Saturn rules over old things, things that are in our far past. Okay, when times were better, when life was more carefree or innocent, when you could live off the earth. It's this impossible golden age. Sometimes it's described as the Garden of Eden, where you could do no wrong because there was no wrong and there was no reason to do wrong. So Saturn has this kind of nostalgia, which is interesting because Saturn rules Capricorn, which is partnered with Cancer, which is ruled by the moon. And Cancerians, because the moon ruled, are famously sentimental, famously nostalgic. But the Capricornian nostalgia, the Saturnian nostalgia, Aquarians have it too, is this longing for when things were better. Think of the Egyptian pyramids for a moment, if you will. When ancient Greece was ancient Greece, Egypt was already even more ancient. And the Greeks would go and they would visit Egypt and they would look at these extraordinary pyramids and they would be like, who built that? Build such a beautiful, magnificent thing. You know, even to this day, it's kind of like, how were the pyramids built? You know, so there was this feeling like back in the past, there was this superior engineering or there was this superior civilization. There was the superior technology back then, which has since degraded or become eroded since. And so Saturn is that one side of Aquarius, which is always aching for the past when things were better, the civilizations that were buried beneath the sands of time. Saturn famously rules over ruined civilizations that were once great, but now we only can imagine what they were like based on their relics and based on their ruins, and a longing and an ache for that. This is the Saturnian longing and yearning for the past when things were great, and we lost it as we became more modern. We became more selfish. We became more in it for ourselves. Technology was not a tool. It became a weapon, or it became monetized. And so, you know, there's that Saturnian longing for the past, and then that Saturnian disgust, for lack of a better word, that Saturnian disgust with how it all turned out now. You know, that here we have this extraordinary background as a civilization, and look at what we did with it. Look at what we've wasted. And if only we could get back to that order, that paradise, that golden time. The other ruling planet of Aquarius is Uranus, all right? So Uranus, which is associated with eternity, this is the father of Saturn who's overthrown. Uranus, Oranos is his Greek name, was always seen as the stars in the nighttime sky, in the firmament. The heavens was basically Uranus. And Urania was the study of the heavens. And so Uranus was eternity. It was the stars that were beyond our reach. We could see them every night, but they were there before we were born. They'll be there after we die. And they were seen as eternal. They were seen as living forever. And so there's this yearning for the heavens. And Uranus will also represent a yearning for the future. Uranus's attitude about the past is, these were all works in progress. These were all experiments to improve our civilization, and they've been brought down by past prejudices or past biases or what was defective about a society. So if we can rid ourselves of that past, and if we could just focus on the future, on realizing our potential as the human species, as embracing the truest principles, the highest virtues. Plato talks about the eternal truths, you know, like justice and beauty, these things that, like the stars, lift our gaze up into the heavens and they guide us through the terrain that we travel in our lives, these Uranian principles that if we can reach them, if we can espouse the highest, will make us better people than we've ever been before, and will leave behind our base nature, our animal nature, our lusts and our selfishness and our only being it for ourselves. So this is the Uranian pull. And the Uranian pull is often associated to things like the highest mind, like the scientist or the metaphysician or someone who is highly principled. These are seen as an evolved self, and evolving towards what is the highest and the best in our species. The pyramids were built centuries ago, but now we're going to build something even greater, like AI or technologies that modernize. We're going to figure out the DNA and give ourselves long-lasting life, maybe even immortality one day. These are all the Uranian impulses towards this future, which we haven't reached yet. And we never will, because we're always living in the present. But anyway, this is what Uranus is doing. So Aquarius, the best way to think of an Aquarian temperament is as a pendulum that swings back and forth between the Saturn and the Uranus. It swings towards, let's head back to the past and restore what was great before we made these horrible errors and these bad choices. And Uranus, which is get over the past baggage, embrace what is superior about the species in terms of its mind and its imagination, and follow that true course and transform, leave behind, transcend your humanity, leave it behind and become something, you upload into the great celestial mind that is the universe, or something along those lines. An Aquarius swings like a pendulum between the two. And you will see in the lives of Aquarians that they'll go through maybe 7 or 14-year periods where they're living life in one lifestyle. Maybe it's more Uranian, and they feel like they've swung like a pendulum and they've gone too far out there. And so they have to swing back towards the Saturnian, towards the formatted, towards what is structured. But if they get too structured, if they get too Saturnian, then they throw over those limits and they swing back towards the Uranian. So there's always this quality of being in motion between these two extremes that exist inside of an Aquarian psyche. This longing for a past that they can't get back to, and this longing for a future that they may never live to see. A future that's utopian, that's free of vices and selfishness, and brings about perfect society where everyone is equal and there is no want. In essence, it's a reinstatement of that golden age, but cast in a future context. But the big question, the big dynamic that an Aquarius wrestles with is the simple question, the simple dilemma maybe, which is, am I ahead of my time, or has my time come? And when you think that Saturn's time, Uranus's eternity, it's not a far stretch to imagine that Aquarians have a problem with timing. Okay, they're either too far ahead, and then if they're too far ahead, if they're too far ahead of their time, if they bring about an inventive idea or share this vision of the way that things could be, it may leave people scratching their heads and wondering, what the hell is she talking about? What is he talking about? It's like, I have no idea. It's too futuristic. It's too out there. It's too fantastic. All right. And so Aquarians who are sort of ahead of their time, they may be very prescient. They may be very visionary as to the future. But at the same time, there's this feeling like they're talking to people in another language, that no one can follow what they're saying. And so there's a despondency. And there's a feeling of just being out of sync, and Saturn already has that outsider status as a planet. And so that kind of feeds into this out of sync quality that Aquarians can experience in their own lives. But what if for an Aquarian, their time has come? Remember that Uranus is associated to modern technology, and actually the roots of Uranus go back to electricity. Electricity had just been invented and was being experimented with at the time of Uranus's discovery. Benjamin Franklin was the great electrical ambassador who had tamed the lightning bolt because he had created the lightning rod. and turned the lightning bolt from being this lethal power into something that could be harnessed to illuminate a light. This illuminating of lights is something that's just beginning around the time of the French Revolution, which is around the time that Uranus is discovered. Uranus is discovered just a few years before the French Revolution. In fact, Uranus is discovered in the midpoint between the beginning of the American War for Independence and the French Revolution. So this spark, this light bulb going off, we all know like, oh, and then a light bulb went off and all of a sudden everything's illuminated and you can see it. Well, this is what happens to the Aquarian when their time has come. They have this different idea, they have this message, they have this innovative way of thinking, they have this invention, and it clicks with people, and all of a sudden light bulbs go off over everyone else's head as well. This is what the Aquarius experiences when their time has come. Like their idea isn't so outlandish. In fact, it's ripe. It's waiting to be expressed and seen, and people see it. And so there can be this feeling of like, oh, we all get it right now, and this is really great. So this idea that Aquarius can sort of be either ahead of its time, and so no one gets it, or its time has come, and then everyone gets the Aquarius and what's going on with them. So these are the ideas that I want you to keep in mind as we talk about Pluto moving into Aquarius and its impact on each of the zodiac signs. Now, for people born under Aries, this is going to be a wonderful period of time with Pluto moving into the zodiac sign of Aquarius. The reason for that is because Aries is a fire sign and Aquarius is an air sign. And these are two elements that share the same gender. Now, before we used to say these were the male elements, air and fire, the male or the masculine elements, and that the feminine elements, earth and water, well, they were basically just feminine and passive even. That language has kind of changed. Now we often will refer to the masculine signs, air and fire, as being yang, and the feminine signs, water and earth, as being yin. Okay, and that's kind of a good way to think of them so that it's not so gender biased. So essentially what you have with the yang energy is a very active and even kind of consuming sort of energy. Aries is a fire sign, and fire is all about light, and it's all about heat, and it's all about celebrating the individual. No element other than the fire signs, and the fire signs are Leo and Sagittarius, no element celebrates individuality, the uniqueness of a person, like a fire sign does, all right? So fire is all about being true to myself, being true to my impulses, being true to what I'm feeling, being true to what I'm thinking, and being the best me, the most what we would call nowadays authentic self that I could possibly be. What happens when you have a sextile, and a sextile basically, Aries is a fire sign, and so it sextiles Aquarius and it sextiles Gemini. These are the two air signs that essentially bookend Aries. And so what happens, well, it's like when fire and air get together. Air can be an accelerant for fire. People know this who battled firestorms where they live in different parts of the country and different parts of the world. The thing that firemen or rescuers fear most is a high wind, because a wind can spread a fire like nobody's business. It accelerates it. This same idea takes place when you have Aquarius and Aries forming a sextile with one another. The Aquarius accelerates the Aries fiery energy, and it makes it more passionate, and it makes it move along and progress more speedily than it has before. So if you're born under the zodiac sign of Aries, because of the placement of Pluto in Aquarius, you may find in the past year that you have entered into a different society. There's a different group of people that maybe you're hanging out with, or maybe that you're working with, or maybe you've moved to a new neighborhood, maybe you've moved to a new state, maybe you've moved to a new part of the world, but you may feel like you are engaging maybe for the first time in years. Who knows? Maybe for the first time in your life, you may feel like you're engaging with people who really understand you, but more importantly, people who really understand what you could be one day. All of us have a potential that resides within us. We have the potential for good or evil. We have the potential to be very talented or pursue a particular talent or skill in some sort of degree, like, oh, this person has a musical potential, if only you would hone it. This person has the potential to really understand, or the capacity to understand finances, if you would only hone it. Just because you have potential, just because you have talent, doesn't mean that you're going to hone it. A lot of times people who are tremendously talented feel like they don't have to develop that talent, or that it's fine as is. It's just like the person to whom things come easily in life. They're not going to strive as hard as someone who is struggling against things not coming as easily, because they kind of expect things to fall in their lap, and that's fine and that's good as long as that lasts. And for some lucky souls, that lasts their entire lives. But just because you have a potential doesn't mean that you're going to do anything with it. Doesn't mean that you're going to take that book off the shelf and read it. So what happens here with Pluto being in Aquarius, sextiling the Aries, what that does is that the air of Aquarius lifts the sights of the fiery Aries. Okay, so the sights will be lifted. I could do more. I could be so much more than who or what I am right now. So it's a very aspirational placement. And what you may find if you're born in the zodiac sign of Aries is that you're surrounded by people who have a higher opinion of you and your capabilities and your abilities than you do. Okay. Now that sounds like a wonderful thing, like we all want to be surrounded by someone who's like, you're really good at this, but I can show you how to make it better. But a lot of times, as someone shows us how to make it better, this might conflict with what we believe about ourselves or what we're comfortable with, or maybe we're being made to work too hard for this. So there can kind of be a struggle with people who see in you a potential that needs to be developed. You might be on board with it, or you may not be. If you're Aries at this time in your life, you're on board with it. So this is the alignment of the energies. And so you may be drawn to these people's vision of you. You may be drawn to their high expectations. You may be drawn to their rigorous standards. You may be drawn to their personal, maybe even financial investment in your future. And this might be something that you find exciting. This might be something that you find enlivening, to have people believe in you like this, to have people who see you going further than even you ever saw yourself going. This can be a wonderful, wonderful thing. Pluto will always carry what I call the Faustian bargain, the deal that you make with the devil to get to where you want to go. There's not always a sort of downside to Pluto, but there's this kind of almost diabolical trade-off. What are you going to sell? In the old days, it was selling your soul. What are you going to sell? What are you going to give away? What are you going to trade in order to get what it is that you want? And that element will always show up whenever Pluto is very, very strong. Now, in your case, Aries, what it may be is you may have anxieties, actually, which is, it's exciting to be surrounded by people who see you as having all of this potential, but do they like you for you? Would they like you if you didn't measure up? Would they like you if you didn't realize your potential? Would they like you if you were just you? And so what can sort of happen here is this feeling that, A, I can't let anyone else down, like they have this higher vision of me and I need to live up to that. And that's a good thing. I should live up to it. That's going to speak to Aries always wanting to rise to a challenge and to improve itself and its standing in the world. But at the same time, there can almost be a feeling like you have to do what they say and you have to play along. You have to toe the party line in some regard because they gave you these things. They gave you their belief. They gave you their faith. They invested in you. And it can start to feel like maybe you're living out their expectations or their vision of you, and not necessarily the vision you have of yourself. So this can almost be this feeling. I mean, the Faustian bargain could be really along the lines of, I like the future vision they have of me more than I had of myself. In fact, maybe I didn't even have one of myself. And so I'm going to trade in me for that. All right. I'm going to apply myself to those higher standards, discipline, all these sorts of things. And I'm going to push myself because I don't want to let them down. But what about letting yourself down? Or is this something you truly want to do for yourself? These reservations may be things that you don't experience right away because it may be a very this is exciting period, but they may show up. And when they do show up, you may feel that separation between yourself and someone else's idea of you. And that could potentially become quite the dilemma. But whenever you're dealing with things Plutonian, those dilemmas also carry within them the very seeds, the very dynamics of personal evolution itself. Now, if you're born into Taurus, this period of time of Pluto being in Aquarius is going to be a very challenging aspect for you. Why? Well, in your solar horoscope, Pluto in Aquarius is at the top of your solar horoscope chart. It's in the 12 noon position. And so this is talking a lot about status. This is talking a lot about achievement. Essentially, if you've got Pluto natally in your 10th house or in your solar horoscope, you want to be top dog. I need to be the top dog. I need to be in the top position. I need to be the dominant figure here. Now, this is interesting because Taurus is not really the most driven sign of the zodiac, which is kind of funny because we think of Taurus as being driven because they're the workaholics, they're the beast of burden. They come in earlier and leave later than everyone else. But Taurus isn't really driven in that Marsy way. It's a Venus-ruled sign. Taurus is more industrious than it is driven. That industry, that workaholic pattern that Taurians can get into, that doesn't always translate into ambition. As a Taurus, you want to do your job. You want to do your job to the best of the ability. You probably want to make as much money as you can because you're born under Venus. You work hard, you play harder. So you want to be surrounded by fine and wonderful and luxurious things that really celebrate how much hard work you have done. So what Pluto's going to do in this placement is that it's going to get you thinking about what it means to climb to the top. Now, as a Taurus, you might be like, well, everyone wants to be in charge, or that's a good thing, or whatever. But you might also be at that point where it's like, I've seen what it's like to be in charge. It's not so great. There's a lot of stress involved in that. People who are at the top of the ladder, it all looks like it's fine and dandy, but actually it's very stressful and they have to manage other people more than they are involved in doing their work. They kind of become separated from what got them involved in the industry or the creative expression or the trade or the business that they're running. And that, if you're on top, you're actually in a position where people envy that spot and maybe want to overthrow you. They maybe want to, push you out of that position. So as a Taurus, you might be very comfortable with where you are right now. I love my work. I love what I'm doing. I'm bringing home the bacon. I'm providing for the people in my life. I'm providing for myself, and I'm really enjoying these things. But there's always a nefarious quality to Pluto. There's always this kind of underside that isn't seen as being positive or constructive. It's often seen as being kind of negative or maybe even demonizing in some sort of way. It's what I call the Faustian bargain, the deal that you make with the devil. And in the story of Faust, Faust is a magician who wants to know even more things and live forever and be the most powerful person in the world. And he sells his soul to the devil, who allows him to enjoy and experience all these things, and then at the end of it, drags down to hell. It's a very old story, and it's one that's often associated to ambition and drive and power and corruption. So as a Taurus, you might be very happy with what you're doing. You might be very comfortable. That might not even be something that you want. But what Pluto may introduce, being in the zodiac sign of Aquarius, is that if you don't take that top position, you may lose the things that you have. All right. So in some ways, you may experience in your work or in your company being drafted into taking on this executive position, this in control position, and that you have to take it on in order to protect what's yours. That if you don't take it on, you might be let go. If you don't take it on, you might be squeezed out of the running and put into a position which could be potentially vulnerable or redundant at some point. You may find that you're being drafted or forced to rise to the top and to plant your flag in order to defend your interests. And that's what I mean by nefarious. It's not something that you set out to do, but circumstances are aligning in such a way as to force you into this position. And that's going to be quite a dilemma. But then quandaries and dilemmas are the things of Pluto. And it's not meant to torment you. A lot of times people feel like it is, but it's actually meant to raise your consciousness. It's meant to get you in touch with your truer values. It's meant to maybe show that you being pushed into a position that you didn't want, you may actually thrive in it a lot better and be a better executive than most other people would be in those positions. So even though it may seem like we're being forced into something that we really don't want or that we're paying too high a price, there's the other side of it, in that Pluto can perhaps introduce us to parts of ourselves that we didn't trust as much, or we thought we would have to give up, and that we don't have to give up in order to go and get something that we truly want. The big question for those of you who are born under the zodiac sign of Gemini is, did you bite off more than you can chew? That's the big question you'll be facing as Pluto enters the zodiac sign of Aquarius. Aquarius, as I mentioned before, is an air sign, just like Gemini. And so it forms what we call in astrology a trine, that is a harmonizing energy between two signs of like element. The two signs understand one another, and they want the best for one another, and they're going to be mutually supportive of one another's aims, aspirations, and ambitions. So here, what's going to happen with the Pluto in Aquarius, with where it's situated in your solar horoscope, what's going to happen here is that your sights are going to be lifted. Your horizons are going to broaden. But the first thing that you're going to enjoy is that the world is your playground again. It's almost like what you may feel with Pluto entering Aquarius is that you've been let out of class and it's recess and you get to go and explore and play in your world again. So this is going to be a benevolent, this is going to be a good, positive twist for you. But there are some differences between Aquarius and Gemini. Aquarius is a fixed sign and Gemini is a mutable one. So Geminis enjoy their variables and their choices, and I could do this, I could do that, or maybe I could move it back and forth the other way, and things like that. Aquarius isn't like that. Aquarius is a fixed sign. So of all of the air signs, and the three signs are Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius, Aquarius is the most fixed and set on one outcome. All right, it has a fixity of purpose. And so what's going to happen with the Gemini is that normally mutable, changeable, playful element, which is so recognizable about your zodiac sign, is going to become more serious. It's going to become more focused as you realize that the actions that you take in your life have consequences, and they have some very serious consequences. So you can't be casual in the way that you were before. You can't be as exploratory as you were before. You can't joke and maybe poke someone in the ribs in the way that you did before, because there's going to be a tremendous amount of scrutiny on every little thing that you do, that every action has immediate repercussions and will have immediate consequences. And so as you get into this new feeling of Pluto and Aquarius, which at first is going to feel very liberating and very like the world is my playground and this is wonderful, you may also start to experience how inhibiting it can be, that so much relies on this decision that you make. It's what every young parent goes through, it's like, oh, I had the baby and this is a wonderful thing. And then all of a sudden it's like, this baby depends on me. Every action I have is going to have an impact on this baby, and so I'm responsible for this child. I can't just go and do the things that I want to do. And sometimes that's going to be wonderful and it can be playful and you can be with the magic and the wonder of your child. And at other times, the child may feel like a responsibility or an obligation, or that you're missing out. And this is essentially what the Pluto in Aquarius is going to be. It's going to sort of bump up your status in the world. It's going to certainly add more to your influence and to your reach. But in what you might have thought originally was going to be a very liberating and freeing, maybe even fun way of being, is also going to bring with it a tremendous sense of responsibility and obligation, and maybe even feel inhibited in some sort of way. That's the one difference, which is Gemini is mutable, Aquarius is fixed, and there's going to be fixity of purpose for now on, that Pluto's moving through Aquarius, that you can't be fickle or playful or tap dance in and tap dance out, that you have to not only apply yourself, but you're sort of being drafted to apply yourself. The other thing is that Aquarius has a big picture way of viewing things, and Gemini is not big picture. Gemini likes to play with this and that, and it likes to work with combinations, and it likes to see what those different combinations and different formulas will result in. So there's a more playful, immediate sense to Gemini. But with this Pluto and Aquarius, it's going to be much more big picture. It's kind of like, I don't know, here's a good example. It's kind of like, as a kid, you were really good at drawing and you loved drawing and scribbling and doing doodles and things like that. And now you've gotten into art school and all of a sudden you're expected to know about perspective and shading and techniques and all these sorts of things. And at first it might be kind of like, oh, this is the next step up. But then at the same time, it might be like, well, that took all the fun out of it, or where did the fun go with something like this? Or is this what I signed on for originally? So these will be things that are very much on your mind as Pluto and Aquarius sort of raises the stakes in your life. But at the same time, even though you may find yourself continually questioning whether this is what you want or not, missing the times when it was much more fun or more recreational, you might find yourself really stepping up in ways that you will be surprised by, but also very proud of at the same time. For people born under the zodiac sign of Cancer, your world has changed dramatically. In many ways, it kind of reminds me of someone who's been serving a prison sentence for X amount of years, hoping that one day they would be released. Now comes the day of their release, they're let out of prison, and what do I do next? Kind of like, what's life outside of these four walls? Now, I'm not saying that you've been incarcerated, or in prison for the past few years, but you have lived with Pluto traveling through your opposite sign of Capricorn. And so that could have made you feel very much like you were in a specific groove, that there was a specific path you were supposed to follow, that this was the way that things were supposed to be ad infinitum. And they weren't, oftentimes they weren't anything of your choice. They were maybe things that were imposed upon you, obligations or responsibilities that were put onto your shoulders. And so you lived a particular life that was very defined in opposition to Pluto energy. And so there may have been a feeling of sometimes getting the upper hand, but then losing that upper hand. you weren't really working at full capacity. And that might have been the story of your life off and on since 2009 to now. Now Pluto has moved into the zodiac sign of Aquarius. It's no longer a polarizing energy in your life. It's a mysterious one. It's one that you don't really get. When you are opposite a planet, when a planet is traveling opposite your zodiac sign, you can see that planet, you can understand that planet, but you're far away from that planet. There's no proximity. There's no closeness to it. It's almost like you can see what you're up against. You're not really clear on how you're supposed to get around that. It's just you're in polar opposite camps. When Pluto switches to a sign like Aquarius, it introduces something new, but it's not really understood. And that's because it forms what we call in astrology a quincunx. And a quincunx is a relationship of non-relationship between two signs. It's a whole complex thing, but what I'm going to basically say or describe the quincunx energy here for you is that you're going to be continually trying to find fits with Pluto and Aquarius that don't really click, but somehow work. And so there's going to be this feeling like there's always a wrinkle that's going to the results that you want, but the wrinkle at different times can be disruptive, or the wrinkle at different times can be very enlightening. But for the next few years, there's going to be a kind of like question mark over your process, over your method, over how you go about things. Some people find that very frustrating, very defeating. Other people find that very creative. Other people find that very enlivening. It's like, wow, okay, my life is a work in process. And that could be like a really, really great thing. As a Cancer, you want more consistency. And so getting used to these radical elements that are going to be thrown into your life every couple of years or so, it may throw you off track, but it may also lead you to better places than you would have gone under your own steam. So what you're experiencing right now is the rules of the game are changing in your life. And there's a new terrain. Maybe you've entered into a new relationship. Maybe you've moved. Maybe there's been a change in your family makeup. Maybe you've switched industries. You were working in one industry and now you're in another. Maybe you've switched companies or even departments or divisions. In any case, there's this feeling of brave new world that's going on. And you don't really understand what the rules of the game are yet. Maybe you're working with a new group of people in some sort of regard. And again, being a Cancer, you have a tendency more to want to blend in and really sort of gravitate towards the people that you feel get you in that beautiful watery bonding energy. But you may be involved in a situation right now in which there isn't a lot of bonding. There might be a lot of kinetic energy. There may be a lot of things that have to be done very quickly, or maybe even on the fly. And there may be a different group of people, and there may be a whole different status in your life right now. So you may feel very discombobulated. You may feel very lost, and that you need to get the lay of the land here. The familiar landmarks that used to point the way no longer point the way like they used to. And so you may find yourself having to find your way by instinct, by going with what you feel. And because it's so unfamiliar, the feelings aren't going to register in that comfortable way. It's going to be kind of like making unconscious guesses, emotional guesses as to what might be right. And the other thing that's going to be going on during this period of time, either because you're being encouraged to do this or circumstances are forcing you to do this, is this idea that making things up as you go. You're not really certain of where you're going, of what you have. You've got this new game board, this new playing field, and you're kind of being spontaneous. You're making things up as you go. And this is a good thing. This is what Pluto's getting you to do. Because things aren't going to click into place. Your routines aren't going to work the way that they used to. Your rituals won't bring that centeredness in the way that they used to. You're not totally thrown off kilter, but you are going to feel like you're approaching life at a bit of an angle. And instead of trying to right yourself, or maybe even go back the way that you came, let yourself sort of get into the headspace of looking at things maybe a little askew or at a different angle. And you may feel as time passes that not only do you get your thing, but there are parts of you, your creativity, your inventiveness, that are coming out in ways that they never did before. And so that's why I would say that this period of time of Pluto in Aquarius can be a very stimulating and even fulfilling time for you, although probably in the most unexpected of ways. For people born under the zodiac sign of Leo, this period of time when Pluto is traveling through your opposite sign, this is going to be a very challenging time for you. Whenever you have a planet that's opposite you, it sets up polarizing energies. You're going to feel like the planet is in the opposite corner from where your corner is, and that there is no way that the two of you are going to get one another. So maybe you might as well just not try. I like to describe oppositions, where my favorite example these days for an opposition are the two parties in Congress, the two political parties in Congress. They are absolutely polarized. There is no mid-ground that exists between the two of them, and they are not budging from their opposite positions. This makes the relationship between the two of them very brittle, potentially fractious, and very discordant. As you might imagine, not a lot gets done when you have two energies that are polar opposite. The difference between opposition and a square is that a square, although combative and fighting, squares are of the nature of Mars, named after the Roman god of war. An opposition has nothing to do with one another. They don't have to have anything to do with one another. As psychologists will say, lends itself to opportunities to project all of those things that you don't like about yourself onto the other person, all right? So you're the one who's totally good, and the other person is totally bad. Now, I'm not saying that that's what's going to be going on for the next 19 years, that Pluto is traveling through the zodiac sign of Aquarius. But what I am going to say is that you may begin this period of time with a significant split. You as a Leo is a fire sign. A fire sign celebrate individuality. They celebrate being true to yourself. You as a Leo are going to feel like you need to be true to yourself. You're fighting for your right, your privilege, your prerogative, your birthright to be true to yourself. And who is opposing you? Them, capital THEM, the other people, them. Them wants your fire. Them wants to squelch your individuality. Them wants to make you anonymous. Them wants to ignore you. Them wants to oppress you. Them wants nothing to do with you. Them wants to dominate you. Okay, so there's this feeling of being on one end of the seesaw, them on the other, and that you're going up and down. Sometimes you'll be the ascendancy, and that feels good. And then sometimes them is in the ascendancy, and that doesn't feel so good. So when Pluto is opposite your sign, you don't connect to that energy naturally, and you will always feel threatened or overpowered until you do. All right. So you have a choice. You can continue with a me versus them perspective, which, seeing that Pluto's going to be in Aquarius for a long period of time, isn't really going to be sustainable in the long run. All right. So you can either go into your opposite camp and not move, or you can begin to go out and engage with them. Now, when you're engaging with them, the best idea that I could share with you is to not engage with them as a group or a hypothetical situation or some sort of generic collection of people. I would very strongly advise engaging with the opposite party on a one-to-one basis. Remember that Leo is a fire sign. Fire signs celebrate individuality. What it also means by celebrating individuality is that you're not just celebrating your own individuality, but you're recognizing the individuality in other people. So when you engage in an energy of people that you think have nothing in common with you, and that there's no way of bridging this gap, when you meet them individually, when you meet them in their home, when you go out for a meal after work, when you meet their pets or their children or their relatives, or you see what they're like away from the workaday world, when you spend time with someone who's very different from you on a one-to-one basis, that person becomes a human being. That person isn't some generic threat. That person becomes a human being, and you start to see and recognize the things you have in common. They're not going to be the exact thing in common. You may speak different languages. You may worship different gods. You may have different political ideologies. You may have different cultures. But when you humanize a person, which is best done not as a lesson written out on a chalkboard, but on engaging that person individuality, taking that one-on-one approach, what it does is that it breaks down prejudice. It breaks down assumptions, and it opens your mind. It opens your heart to other people's perspectives, to other people's points of view, and to other people's histories, to their backgrounds, to their joys and their pains, their triumphs and their failures. And when this happens, Pluto actually works a beautiful miracle, because it takes something that seemed so foreign and something that might even have seemed so threatening. And it wasn't about you, rising to the challenge of that and beating back the fear, but instead getting to know something that felt so other, something that felt so foreign, that in getting to know that, you don't really make the person like you. What you do is that you find that natural humanity that exists between you and another person. And that does more than build a bridge. It expands your world, and it makes the world a beautiful place to live in. For people born under Virgo, this period of time of Pluto moving through the sign of Aquarius is going to be very intriguing. It's not going to be comfortable. It's not going to make for an easy fit, but it is definitely going to impact you in some very original and some very creative ways. Now, when you look at the astrological signs of Aquarius and Virgo, you see pretty much right off the bat that they've got nothing in common, all right? Aquarius is a fixed sign, Virgo is a mutable sign, so their modes are different. Their elements are different. Aquarius is an air sign, Virgo is an earth sign. So their elements are different, and the way that they approach things are very different. Aquarius has a more remote, bigger picture view of life and matters, and Virgo is much more detail-oriented and much more, really sort of figuring out how the smaller things connect in order to produce the greater or the bigger results. So there's not really much in common. These two signs don't conjoin, they don't oppose, they don't square. These two signs don't trine, and these two signs don't sextile. In other words, they don't follow any of the original Ptolemaic aspects. And the Ptolemaic aspects described relationships among the signs or the planets in different signs. And if anything, the energy between Virgo and Aquarius is incongruous. But even in that incongruity, there are certain things that these two signs have in common, all right? The first thing that comes to mind when you think of Aquarius and when you think of Virgo is the mind. These are two very cerebral signs. Virgo's kind of cerebral, kind of not. I mean, Virgo puts a lot of stock in investment in thinking, in deducing, in problem solving, but it's still an earth sign, so it's still very physical, and it's still very of a feeling nature. But what Virgo and Aquarius have in common is a thinking quality. These are two signs that love to read. These are two signs that love to think. And these are two signs that love to problem solve. But what they don't have in common in terms of the element is that Aquarius is air, so it's going to naturally take a bird's eye view of things. And there can be a sort of remoteness or distancing quality to Aquarius. It could get a little Mr. Spock, a little Vulcan in its POV of the world. And Virgo is always of the body. It's always connected to the body. In fact, of all the earth signs, Virgo is the most entwined and identified with its body. It cares for its body. And so where you can get something that's very different is that Aquarius tends to be more mind over matter. It can even do a disconnect. And Virgo can be very mindful of the matters. It's very mindful of things and certainly keeps its attention on practical problems and practical solutions. So when these two zodiac sign energies come together, the Pluto in Aquarius is going to sort of bring that bird's eye perspective to the Virgo. In other words, Virgo, which can usually be very deductive in its thinking and very problem-solving in its thinking, can all of a sudden kind of take on bird's eye view. It's almost like upgrading your computer. Virgo goes from this old 2010 computer to the latest model. And so everything becomes accelerated during this period of time. Certainly mentally, things will become accelerated. As a Virgo, you may experience yourself being tasked with new things to learn and being actually quite enlivened and stimulated by that and learning very, very quickly. The mental wheels are moving much more quickly than you're accustomed to. And being a Virgo, you're going to absolutely love that idea. It's like being on the speed round of a game show and hitting the buzzer and getting every question right. You're going to like that. What Aquarius also does that you're going to like is that it sort of introduces this impartiality to you. You're going to find during this period of time that Pluto is in Aquarius that you don't take things as personally as you used to. You could sort of see where it works in the greater scheme of things. And you're going to be less insistent on this is the format, this is the way that things are done. It has to be like this. If anything, you're going to be very open to innovation and invention, and these are good things. And that kind of impartiality, you might like not getting so wound up about things, not getting so consternated about details and things like that. But the not so good part to Pluto being in the zodiac sign of Aquarius is that you can lose touch with that personalness. I don't know, is that a word? Personalness? Okay, but the word that comes to mind. You can lose touch with that personalness that makes your insights so special. In other words, it's because you identify so much with your body. It's because Virgo can be very here and now, very present-oriented, that you can quickly work out the impact that a decision is going to have on these people and try to figure out how to make it good rather than just brusque. That personal investment that you have in your day-to-day exchanges lends itself not only to your delivery, which is being born under the zodiac sign of work and service. You're very good at helping people solve a problem for themselves. You could solve it on your own, but you're very good at teaching them how they could solve it for themselves. And you're very good at empowering people, meeting people where they are and helping them to understand what they could do to improve their situation. There's that personal investment, but the Pluto in Aquarius can sort of bring out more of a, I'm wasting too much time on this one-on-one when I could be dealing with whole groups of people instead. And we're already sort of drifting towards larger groups of people, statistics, facts, addressing things in a group of people that we never get to know, like in a TED Talk or something like that. And that's kind of like the Aquarian dream, right? But for Virgos want that one-on-oneness. They're kind of like Leo in that way. They really enjoy that one-on-oneness, that intimacy that they have with another person. And so you may find that the demands of your job, your work, the demands of your daily circumstances, there may be a tendency to sort of treat people like an assembly line, Like here's one problem after another, or deal with people's issues globally rather than intimately. And what I would say as an astrologer, don't lose sight of that intimacy. Don't lose that one-on-oneness, because that's the thing, Virgo, that makes you so special. Some people are special because they care, but you care and then you share what to do to help that person to help themselves. And even though it might be more time efficient to treat people, more as bulk, you never want to lose the quality of those unique interpersonal exchanges. For people born under Libra, this period of time when Pluto is going through Aquarius is going to be a marvelous time for you. And that's because Aquarius is an air sign, just like Libra is an air sign. So the relationship between Pluto and your own sign is one that's called a trine. It benefits. The trine is an energy that exists between two zodiac signs of like element. And the trine energy will support and encourage what's going on with the other sign. In fact, the two of you are as simpatico can be. So what Pluto's going to do when it's in the zodiac sign of Aquarius is it's going to introduce some of that unpredictability that's associated with the planet Uranus into the symmetrical view of the world, which is very much identified with Libra and the balanced scales. In fact, what Pluto's going to kind of do is that it's going to regenerate you the more that you defy expectations. Pluto in Aquarius is going to push you outside your lane, outside of the way that you typically do things. When you're born under the sign of the scales, your mission in life is to render good judgment. You put one object in one dish, other counterweights in the other dish to determine what the value is, either of the object itself or what the value of a judgment is going to be. And so there can be a lot of emphasis on words, a lot of emphasis on ways of measuring things that are impartial, a lot of reliance on weights and measures and math, things that aren't personal. And in order to arrive at a decision or a judgment, which is good judgment. What Pluto in Aquarius is going to do, Aquarius is a fixed sign and Libra is a cardinal sign. Cardinal signs are very objective oriented. They want to reach an objective. And for Libra, the objective you want to reach, as I said, is good judgment. Aquarius, Pluto in Aquarius is going to give you a fixity of purpose. Whereas before as a Libra, you might have been a little bit more vacillating. You might have left things open-ended so you could see how they were going to play out. The Pluto in Aquarius is going to make you move quicker and faster towards those judgments. You're not going to be so much going back and forth. You're not going to be the vacillating or the Libra that can't make up their mind, type of thing. The Aquarius is going to give you an edge. You're going to be very decisive. And the more decisive you are, the more praise and support you're going to win. What this is going to do is also push you out of making safe decisions and into decisions that are more unprecedented, decisions that go against the grain, decisions that maybe go against conventional wisdom, but always in pursuit of the truth. That doesn't change. You're going to have more, I guess the best way to put it is that you're going to have more skin in the game when it comes to the pursuit of truth. It's going to really matter. You're going to be less like, well, that's what the rules say, and I can't change them. I just enforce them. So these are the rules, and you have to do it like this. You're going to be less like that, and you're going to be more like, this is what the rules say, and the rules are here for a reason, and let me tell you what the reason is, and let me tell you how the rules are safeguarding you. It's going to be more insistent. It's going to be more decisive, and it's going to be a little bit more ordering. You may be sort of barking orders or rendering verdicts along the way. And so as you become more judgmental, for lack of a better way of putting it, right? the people around you may start to say things like, I miss the old you, or I miss the old you that when I talked about my problems, you would listen endlessly, or I miss the old you that I always felt like you were taking one side, but then you always wanted to know what the other side was, and you would take the time to sort of really weigh both in the balance, and you've got a long memory, Libra, and you're going to be kind of like saying to yourself, well, a couple of years ago, you couldn't stand that about me. You're always like making fun of the way that I couldn't make up my mind or that I was indecisive. Like, what do you mean you missed that? And in a way, it's going to feel funny because you've gone from, if you think of the balance with the two dishes, you've gone from one dish to another dish here. This is going to bring out, as I said, more of that decisive qualities of you. And I think you're going to really enjoy it. I mean, at first you may be a little bit spooked. You may be a little bit like, did I say that? Did I do that? Did I make that decision? But as you do it more and more, you're going to get bolder. As you defy expectations more and more, you're going to grow. And this is what Pluto's doing. If you remember what I said earlier in the episode, it's connected to the seed, and seeds will grow according to the nature of the seed, but they may grow in ways that aren't expected. There are seeds that fall between the cracks in a street. That seed will grow through the cracks of the street to what it can be. That's the whole idea. And it might look kind of funny growing there between the cracks of the street, but that's what a seed does. And that's what's going to be going on with you. You may be growing in ways that are unexpected, but that you're going to know are true to you, even if you don't know it mentally, even though you don't recognize it when you look at your history or your record, but you're going to know that it's right. And so this is something that the Pluto in Aquarius is going to bring. Now, the good thing about this, Libra, is that you're not going to be the pushover, that you used to be. People aren't going to underestimate you in the ways that they used to underestimate you before. It's going to be like, wow, okay, that person really knows their mind. And so this is going to be a good thing. The not so good thing that Pluto can do when it's in Aquarius and it mixes its energy to Libra is there is a tendency for the air signs to disconnect, okay? To be on the outside looking in. All air signs have that tendency, Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius. It's kind of a mind over matter type of thing, like the mind disconnects from the body or the circumstances, or the mind disconnects emotionally to what's going on in a very intimate moment. And so the thing that you're going to want to keep an eye out for is when you tend to disconnect, when you've stopped listening, or when you've stopped being in the moment, because the Pluto in Aquarius is going to emphasize, it's going to encourage that kind of impartiality. It's in those moments when you need to remind yourself that you're a human being and that you have a place in other people's lives and other people have a place in yours, and to sort of reestablish those connections again. I think the easiest sort of thing is when you feel like you're just on automatic listening to someone, take a moment and stop, breathe, and say to the person, you know what? Can you repeat what you just said before, because I didn't really hear you? And that's going to be your way of sort of maintaining those connections to people and staying in the moment and doing those things that Libras do best, which is listen. The Pluto will make you more overriding of people in some ways, in service to good judgment. There will be a sense that what your answer to a solution may upset some people, and that's the cost that happens. Remember, it's always a cost that happens. So take that moment to really examine the people who are going to be affected by the consequences of a decision or a judgment of yours, and to be with them in their humanity, to be with them in their moment. There's a way that people can be hurt by a decision that you make, but it becomes less painful if you sit with them and you explain to them why the decision is being made. They may not agree with you in that moment, but in time they may come to see why you made that decision, And it's always good to sit with someone in that. Even if they don't end up agreeing with you, they will remember later when they do see why you made the decision that you made, the wisdom behind it, and they will appreciate later that you took the time to explain why you were doing the things that you were doing. For people born under the zodiac sign of Scorpio, this period of time when Pluto is moving through Aquarius is going to be life-changing. It's going to be mind-changing. It's going to change your world in a very fundamental way, and I think in a very good and exciting way. Now, Scorpio and Aquarius square one another, okay? That means they have two very different ideas about how things should be. The big disagreement that Aquarius and Scorpio have is that Aquarians tend to take things impersonally, and Scorpios always take things personally. All right, so this is going to be the big challenge during this period of time. You're going to find yourself surrounded by people or living in a world where feelings don't seem to matter like they used to. Mainly your feelings don't seem to matter like they used to. That your feelings are being ignored. Maybe you're being condescended to. Maybe someone is trying to have an intellectual debate with you about what you're feeling. And you're going to find yourself more and more insisting that what you feel is right. Big difference between the Aquarian and the Scorpio temperament, or actually what I should describe as being a difference in the Aquarian and Scorpio perspective, is truth. Aquarius has a relationship to truth, which is an objective truth. It's an impartial truth. And what this goes back to is Plato's eternal truths, like justice and love and beauty, things that are indisputable. You know, this is the ultimate beauty. This is the ultimate truth. This is the ultimate justice, all right? This is the ultimate good. So that idea of these airy or abstract principles, and that the truth in and of itself is abstract. It should emerge as an absolute. When a truth presents itself, it's self-evident. Everyone's like, oh, of course that's true. They all applaud or they say, why would I ever dispute or argue with this? It's so true and it's bedazzling truthfulness. So Aquarians believe in a higher truth that needs to be higher because it needs to be free of the grubby hands of humanity who can't help but ruin and spoil things. Aquarians do have that side to them. They can be very idealistic and have no patience or an intolerance towards aspects of human nature that are not the best aspects or the best virtues that humanity can espouse. And so Aquarius will always put its faith in these eternal truths. They are eternal and as remote as the stars themselves in the sky. Scorpio's perspective of truth, Scorpio's understanding of truth is the dirty, rotten truth, where Aquarius is like, this is ultimate truth, love, beauty, justice. Scorpio is like, what's at the back of your socks drawer? What are you keeping hidden there under those socks of yours? What have you squirreled away? What have you secreted away? So Scorpio always wants to know about the thing you're not talking about. Scorpio always wants to know about the thing that you're hiding, the guilty secret or the shameful indulgence. So Scorpio, because it's ruled by Pluto, which ruled the underworld, is always like lifting the rock and peeking underneath it to see what's there. And that's the truth. It's the truth that you find out in film noir movies. It's the truth you find out through making someone confess to something that they did, where they break down on the witness stand and they're like, I killed him. Scorpio finds it through relentless cross-examination, through relentless questioning and prodding and picking up things meant to trigger the other person's emotional responses. And so a Scorpio will often have the experience of like, aha, I knew it. I knew I was right to be suspicious of you. I was right to be unbelieving. I was right to push the point. So this is Scorpio's truth. It's a burrowing down into the darkness kind of truth and revealing it. And that's because for Scorpio, the truest aspect of ourselves is our humanity, with all of its shortcomings and with all of its failings and with all of its errors. We live in a world where hearts are broken, where people do nasty and horrible things. And what we want to do in a world like that is more than just protect our interests, but to connect with one another through a shared emotional experience of heartbreak or of difficulty or of grievances, and to come together, to not pretend like bad things don't happen, or when we go through a bad period and share it with a friend, and then we're on the other side of that bad period, we stop being friends with that person because we don't want to be reminded of the difficult time that we were going through and what we shared with that person. Scorpio has a long memory, and it believes in being true to yourself, and that being true to yourself is being true to the blood and guts experience of any human being on this planet. And so Scorpio's view is like, forget about the stars and their like remote, pristine beauty. In fact, the stars with their remote pristine beauty are probably more responsible for bad things happening because people fail to live up to that, or they think that they have a divine plan of the way that things should be. And so they're going to, make people fit into that mold rather than the other way around. Scorpio stands up for an emotional, dark truth that isn't always attractive, but nevertheless is probably the most real thing about a person. And so this is where the two signs square. What's going to be fascinating is that Pluto is Scorpio's modern ruling planet. So Pluto is one of your ruling planets. Your other one is Mars. And so with Pluto in the zodiac sign of Aquarius, what your ruling planet is saying is that there are things for you to learn, Scorpio, with Pluto moving through the zodiac sign of Aquarius. You yourself will become a mixture of idealism and cynicism. You yourself, Scorpio, will have moments where you are soaring in your idealism, and then you will have moments in where you are reveling in your cynicism and knowing better than the other person and watching that pristine, better than thou person crumble. Scorpios love watching hypocrites face their hypocrisy and crumble as a result. There's a justice in that Scorpios really celebrate. But Pluto through Aquarius is asking you to incorporate the idea that you can have two truths, or you can have these two aspects can come together in one truth, that you can have an eternal truth and that you can have a what it's like to live in this world truth. And one doesn't have to cancel out the other, that one can perhaps support the other. Now, trying to reconcile those two seemingly irreconcilable perspectives, well, that's going to be the story of your ruling planet Pluto moving through the zodiac sign of Aquarius for the next 20 plus years. But if anyone can reconcile, but do something more than reconcile, if anyone can reconcile and then create something new and different and transfiguring as a result of these seeming contradictions, then it can only be a Scorpio. For people born under the zodiac sign of Sagittarius, this period of time that Pluto is moving through Aquarius is going to be wonderful. You're going to feel like you're finally back in your own groove again. You have that wonderful audacity that's been missing. You have that wonderful faith that won't seem misguided like it seemed before, that it actually, is bearing out that you were right to believe in something. You were right to have faith in something. You won't look foolish or like you were being hopelessly naive. And that's because Aquarius is an air sign, Sagittarius is a fire sign, and they create what is called a sextile. A sextile is an aspect that exists between two elements of the same gender. Now, we used to split the four elements into masculine signs, which were air and fire, and feminine signs, which were water and earth. But over the years, we changed it from masculine and feminine, or active and passive, into, I think, more welcoming terms, more accurate terms, such as yang and yin energies. So air and fire are yang, and earth and water are yin. So what you have with the yang energy that's taking place here is that it's a very active, a very excitable, even at times a very consuming type of energy. It covers a lot of ground. And this is something that people who live in areas of the country and areas of the world that suffer from wildfires that a fire is very, very destructive, but what can make a fire even more destructive is when a wind picks up, because it lifts the flames and it spreads them in all kinds of directions. That's a negative assessment of that energy together. The positive assessment of the energy together is that the air accelerates the fiery energy. It recognizes it, it promotes it, it accelerates it, and it makes it grow larger and bigger, hotter and lighter. And as a Sagittarius, who's gone through a period of time of Pluto moving through Capricorn from 2009 until this year, you have felt in a lot of ways your fiery energy diminished. You have felt in a lot of ways that you weren't really understood, or that you didn't really have permission to be the person that you were. You might even have felt, in some regards, like you were hiding your light underneath a bushel. That will no longer be the case with Pluto moving through the zodiac sign of Aquarius. So Pluto is not only going to recognize your Sagittarian energy, it's going to encourage it, and it's going to empower it. And so what you're going to feel as Pluto moves further into Aquarius, it's been an off and on feeling through 2024, but definitely from now moving forward, what you're going to feel is that you are breaking out of self-imposed boundaries, that you are breaking out of self-imposed limitations, that at long last, you are free to be me. Okay. And this is a wonderful feeling. It's a sensational feeling. It's a warm and enlivening feeling, but it's more than just sort of a campfire that you're sitting around and warming your hands around. It's something that you're going to be harnessing in your life. All right. You're not only going to be taking off the blinders, refusing to accept the way that other people have seen you or to accept the limitations that you've been put under. Not only will you be refusing to accept that, but you will be declaring who you are and what you want. All right. And you will be declaring it in a way in which you feel the zest. You feel this energy. You feel this power. And you also will see people reacting to it like that, instead of what they might have said a couple of years ago, which is like, who are you to say such a thing? This is ridiculous. What a foolish idea, you silly Sagittarius. Instead, it will be like, Sagittarius, where have you been? You're full of zeal and excitement, and you're making me feel zealous and excited. And I want to be zealous and excited with you. Let's all go be zealous and excited. Let's carry on this firestorm and send it spiraling through our lives. So there will be this exhilaration and this confidence that you will feel, instead of this constant feeling of striking the match to try to get the log to start burning. It's one strike of the match, it goes to the log, and the log starts burning. That can't help but build confidence in you. You will feel like not only are your talents being recognized, but that they are improving under the mentorship, the coaching, the support of other people. People are going to be showing you how to do things better, how to push even more, how to go even further. And you at first might find yourself being a little bit squeamish or timid, because this is new. You're kind of used to having your light under a bushel. But you might find yourself, what's that phrase? You might find yourself going for it. All right, that's our phrase, going for it. You might find yourself going for it and actually landing where you need to land rather than off to the side somewhere, So this is going to be a very exhilarating, a very exciting, but the word I also want to share with you, it's going to be a very fulfilling time for you. This is more than approvals and approbation. This is more than recognition and respect. We're talking about fulfillment here. The beautiful thing that Aquarius and Sagittarius have in common is their humanitarianism, their commitment to being human, and to bringing out the humanness in other people, and to bringing people together in like a cause or a belief or a wonderful meeting place. And it's the excitement of people. Sagittarius is always excited about people, and that comes from your Jupiter rulership. So when it combines with Aquarius, you're meeting people that you wouldn't have usually met. You may be residing in countries, cultures, or societies that you weren't raised in. The world becomes a larger, more enriching, more fulfilling place. And what's also going to become more powerful for you is this sense of community, this sense of community that goes beyond the boundaries that you've lived in, that really stretches across state lines or country lines or continent lines, and this wonderful sense of fulfillment. The thing that you're going to want to keep in mind, though, is there too much freedom? What happens when there's too much freedom? Do you take it for granted? Do you get heady with the experience? Do you not care about the freedoms of others? Do you trample on their freedom because it's not as important as yours? Are you above the law? So this idea of there being too much freedom may be something that you want to keep an eye on, as Pluto will be sextiling your sign for the next number of years. But if you keep that in mind, and you don't have to moderate it, just temper it, make a point that if you're free to do something, someone else is free to do it too. And one of the freedoms that someone may have is to disagree with you. And if you can keep in mind that freedoms are individual for a reason, okay, because people have different perspectives, they have different approaches, and to regard and to respect that. And if you reach an impasse, to do what you can to reach out and try to understand that person's perspective. If you can keep those things in mind, then not only will you be making up for a lot of lost time and a lot of lost ground, but you will be coming into yourself in ways that were completely unimaginable before. For people born under the zodiac sign of Capricorn, Pluto in Aquarius is going to be a bit of a head trip. The reason why I say head trip is because it's going to really shift your perspective on something that's very important in your life: money. Now, we all joke about how Capricorns love money. We all immediately think of Scrooge in A Christmas Carol, who weighs everything in terms of currency and of money to be made and money to be lost. And the fear of losing money is what makes Scrooge so Scroogey. And that's why he's visited by the three ghosts of Christmas, and a benevolent heart is revealed. Now, what's going on here with Capricorn isn't a forswearing of your previous miserly ways or existence. Pluto in Aquarius is following on the work that it's done in Pluto in Capricorn. With Pluto having traveled through your own sign, you've gone down to the depths of who you are, you've come back out of it again. Who you are right now in 2024 is a very different person than who you were in 2009. And chances are you're a more enriched person, not only financially, but also perhaps experientially, in terms of what you've lived through and gone through in your life. It's enriched and it's deepened you as a result. So what follows an act like that? That's some act, this act of rebirth, of transformation through the ordeals suffered. What could possibly follow that? And what's going to follow that, because of Pluto's placement in your solar horoscope, is a transformation of the way that you look at money. Now, just even saying the phrase, a transformation of the way that you look at money, is enough to send shivers down any Capricorn spine. It's like, keep your hands off that. I don't care about the transformation. Keep your hands off my money. And that's because Capricorns have so much invested in money as security and so much invested in money as self-preservation. That's the way money really appears or shows up in a Capricorn's life. Capricorn is an earth sign, and earth rules over two things, health and wealth. These are the two most important things to any earth sign. But as an earth sign, and particularly a Capricorn, the work that you do is usually by yourself, all right? You might find yourself in group situations, but you're happiest when you can go off and finish a project on your own, or get people on the phone for very quick exchanges and go back to work, and then come back from having disappeared into the cave of Capricorn with the project done and everyone going, oh my goodness, that's wonderful, that's great. Capricorn is a zodiac sign that tends to labor alone and by itself. It works on itself, and it takes on these responsibilities, shoulders themselves. Capricorns rely on their own research, perseverance, work ethic, and discipline to get the job done. So what's going to happen with Pluto, which is the planet of money, really, in astrology, is Pluto, because Pluto is named after the Roman god of the underworld, and the underworld housed riches like gold and silver and precious metals. Indeed, our word plutocracy comes from Pluto, and it means the moneyed class or the wealthy class. So Pluto is essentially the planet of money. What happens when the planet of money moves into the zodiac sign of Aquarius is this feeling that your money is connected to other people's money. Now, I'm not saying you're going socialist, okay, in your near future, Capricorn. So don't worry. No one's trying to take away your money and make it everyone or anything like that. What I am saying is that how you make your money is integrally connected to other people. In other words, the way that you make your money is going to affect the money making of other people, and other people's money making is going to impact you. Now, at first, that might sound silly. Well, of course, everyone's money is interconnected to everyone else's money. That's how we buy and sell and spend and purchase. What I'm trying to describe here is that over the next few years, you're going to have a more holistic view of money. All right. In other words, you're going to see money as being part of a financial ecosystem. So it's no longer this, I'm in it for myself. I have to make my money and stay away, everyone, and hands off. It's going to be less that, and it's going to be more of an understanding that money is kind of like blood that circulates through the body politic, that it can't coagulate or become a hardened artery in certain sections of the body, because if it does, then the entire body, the entire society, and Aquarius is always about society. The motto of Aquarius is always, a society is only as good as the people in it. Money has to circulate and it has to sustain. And when it becomes caught up in different corners, and doesn't do that in a free and fluid way, then those are the parts of society that are going to suffer, either as a result or because it's keeping energy away from other parts. Now, that might be a little bit more, metaphysical than you as a Capricorn want to go. But if you can understand that more people are coming into your life, you're going to be working with people, working more with people, more people are working for you, or you're working for more people, and you're going to be much more connected to one another financially, and that it's really kind of like this financial tide lifts all boats. It's not you as a dinghy anymore. It's you as a fleet of fishing boats, for lack of a better way of putting it. And that the more that you give and take in whatever your financial position is, the more give and take you're going to receive from those around you. You're working for the welfare of everyone around you, as everyone is working for the welfare of you. And this is how Aquarius works. It sees society as the body politic. It sees it as a body, and that we're all in it together. Now, we can either take it in terms of a we're all in it together lifeboat approach, like we're abandoned on this lifeboat, and anyone who's weak or about to die, we throw over the side of the boat so more of us can eat from the Seabiscuit tin or something along those lines. Or we can see it as a garden. We can see it as, everyone benefiting, everyone benefiting in the ways that they live their life. And as they benefit themselves, they benefit the people around them. So there's more of a collective view that can be there. But this idea that your finances are intricately connected to the finances of others, that when you patronize a small bookstore, for instance, an independent bookstore, you are helping that business to thrive. Not only do you get something that you enjoy, which is a book, but you help that business to thrive, and that thriving business has made your neighborhood a lovelier neighborhood to live in. Perhaps that might be the easiest and best way of illustrating what I'm trying to talk about. with that idea of patronizing the things that you want to patronize that benefit your world, and that then in turn benefits you, to see money as really a blood that's circulating through the entire system of people that you work with, then you're going to be much more collaborative, and you're going to be much more sharing, much more caring, much more nurturing, and you will be able to build more than you've ever built before. And instead of the view of money being, something that can be taken away from you, or scarcity, and this comes from the fact that Capricorn is in the Northern Hemisphere a winter sign. It's associated to the winter solstice. So it's associated to a scarcity. And that scarcity, that fear of scarcity, is built in deep. It's encoded in your zodiac sign. Rather than being more scarce, point of view, there's going to be more of a sharing, caring, and nurturing point of view. It's working with and alongside others to one another's benefit to make your life and their lives all the more prosperous and all the more good. For people born under the zodiac sign of Aquarius, Pluto here is going to bring a centeredness, a firmness, a strength that you haven't really experienced before. Pluto, when it enters a zodiac sign, usually begins by descending down into the nether realms of the sign, reconnecting to aspects of yourself that haven't been recognized or realized or connected with yet. And through ordeal, or through going through difficulty, you learn that you have strengths, resources, and abilities that you never knew that you had before. And this kind of becomes a cathartic experience, which then brings about the rebirth. So the first part of Pluto being in a sign is the descent down into the nether world. And then the second part is the ascent, coming back from the underworld into the light, into the surface world, but being totally transformed, which sounds wonderful and poetic. But if you're a zodiac sign where Pluto's about to enter, you might be like, what am I going to lose? What am I going to have to do without? What's this underworld journey going to be like? It can sound ominous. It can sound a bit frightening. This is where I want to assure you that you are not starting with Pluto for the first time. You Aquarians have experienced Pluto kind of in your sign since 2009. Now, let me clarify. Pluto was in the zodiac sign of Capricorn. Now it's entering the zodiac sign of Aquarius. But Capricorn and Aquarius both share a ruling planet, and that planet is Saturn. So these two signs, which share a planet, Saturn, follow one another in the zodiacal order. So basically, everything that happens in Capricorn is kind of a prelude to what's going to happen to you. So I would imagine for you Aquarians out there, the years of 2009 to 2024 might very well have been like a descent, a long descent into your own personal underworld, all right? And where Capricorn sort of came up out of that, in the 2020, 2021, 2022, 23, those years, or began coming out of that. As Aquarians, that might have been a period of time where you still felt like you were going under, like you were still going down. So Pluto in Aquarius is really at its midpoint in its journey through the Saturn-ruled signs. So Pluto in Aquarius isn't really bringing that descent or anything new, because you've already been living that. Pluto in Aquarius begins with you at a very pivotal point in your life. You are feeling very much at a crossroads between the old world and the new world. And like what I was describing with the twin rulerships of Saturn and Uranus, you may be feeling a split between the Saturn, the loss of the old things, and maybe wanting the old things back, and then moving towards the Uranian, which is a future that's unfamiliar, a future that you haven't really mapped out. I would say even in the past few years, you might have gone through a real changing of the life script as to what your future was supposed to be. Things might not have worked out. Maybe you went as far as you could go in a career path or something along those lines. And now you find yourself in a place where you really don't know what's up or what's down or what's left or what's right, but you're not bewildered. You've had Pluto in a Saturn-ruled sign for a number of years, so your eyes have gotten used to the dark. You know what's working and what's not working, and probably either jettisoned what's not working or you're about to jettison what's not working. And you're being called upon to have this faith to choose this future direction. But before, the future was kind of mapped out or planned in a way. Aquarians are always planning for their future. But right now, you're in the dark. You really don't know what it's going to be. But you're not bewildered. You're not confused. You're not blind to where to go. You have a sense of centrality. You have a sense of strength in yourself. Remember when I was talking earlier about the two suns in the zodiac? There's the sun in the sky, which we relate to the sun sign, and then the dark sun, which mirrors the molten core of our own Earth. That's Pluto. That's the inner sun, which is the dark sun. That dark sun can provide a gravity. It can provide a centeredness. It can provide a feeling of moving forward. You can feel it in your gut. You can feel the rightness of it. So a lot of this is going to be sort of kind of a slow rebirth, because Pluto's so extended in its time in the Saturn-ruled signs. That rebirth is going to be slow. It's not going to be very quick. It's not going to be very fast. And I think it's going to really allow you to participate in your own midwifing. It's going to allow you to learn from your experience instead of putting where you want to go on your experiences and harnessing and guiding them and moving in a particular direction. This is more where you're letting your experiences take the lead and you are following. And so during this period of time, you're going to be trusting in those gut instincts a lot more. They're going to be a surer guide than your thought or your mind will be. So it may not be as aspirational, like these are the things I want to do with my life, as it may be more here and now. These are the things I am doing with my life and leading, moving with that, and creating a kind of gravitational pull in which people are going to be more following your lead, following where you're going. You're going to hear less and less of what people want from you or what they think you should do. And you're going to be concerned less and less with other people's expectations or their visions of you. You're more centered in who you are. This is who you are, and this is what you are doing. And you're going to find that people are more getting behind that. And that might be a very strange position for you to be in. As I've mentioned earlier in the episode, Aquarius always feels like an outsider in the group. But here, you're traveling a path that the group is following you. So you may find yourself in a leadership position if you're not already in one right now. And if you've lost a leadership position, you may find yourself back in it again, back in the saddle. Because where you're going is worth following, and what you say is worth listening to. But you're going to have to get rid of those expectations and that timetable that you imposed on yourself, on the way that you think people think you should think. And you connect with that gut. You connect to who you are, which is who you've been all along. And so that's why it's not going to be a great revelation. It's going to be more like an emergence. It's going to be more like the dawning of a light in the sky. And that's something that is really worth reveling in. That's something that's really worth enjoying as you get to know your new self who was really your true self all along. For people born under Pisces, Pluto in Aquarius is really going to be a time of reckoning for you. Pluto in Aquarius occupies a very sensitive part of your solar horoscope, and it even has a bit of a notorious reputation. It's traveling through what we call your solar 12th house, which is the house of hidden enemies and self-undoing. And that always sounds miserable, like, oh, great, Pluto's going to be in my solar house of hidden enemies and self-undoing for 19 years. Fab. No, it's not going to be that at all. What it's going to do is pretty much what I said before. It's going to be a time of reckoning. But this isn't a time of punishment. This isn't a time of being penalized or squished under someone's boot or something like that. It's a time of getting to know those parts of yourself that have not always worked in your favor, that have not always worked to your advantage. So this is going to be a time that's less about self-improvement, and it's going to be about getting to the bottom of what might be described as self-sabotaging tendencies. All right? So what are the self-sabotaging tendencies of Pisces? Well, Pisces is a zodiac sign that's famously associated to difficulties with alcohol or drug addiction or depression. This is your textbook Pisces. And what that comes from is Pisces' association with the 12th house, the house of self-undoing. But there's more going on than just that. There's a struggle that Pisces has with living in this world. Because one of your ruling planets is Neptune, you're very enamored with the invisible world, with the world that exists beyond this one. And this can be a world of mysticism. This can be a world of losing yourself in ecstatic experiences. This can bring about a sense of being shipwrecked on this planet. This can bring about a despondency that what you see in your mind's eye is so much more beautiful and much more creative than anything you could ever create with your own hands. So Pisces is always having difficulty living on the landmass part of Earth. Okay, Pisces is named after the fish. You want to be plumbing the depths of the unconscious, of the collective unconscious, and swimming in the seas of mysticism and spirituality. But yet, Pisces can feel shipwrecked on this world, that you're a sea creature that has to live on land. And it can be very difficult, especially when your soul searches for more sublime experiences. Or the big problem that they can face is that Pisces can become very enamored with the choices it didn't make, or with the life that should have been, but it didn't work out like that. Now, all mutable signs have a difficulty making a choice or making a decision. Gemini can be like, I want that. Oh, no, I really want this. Or is there a way that we can have both? Can I cut a deal? Okay. Virgo can be like, well, that's one way of deducing it, but could be deduced in this other sort of way. And they can contradict and argue with one another. And I'm kind of like blocked. I don't know which way to go. Sagittarius is continuously, if I had a t-shirt for Sagittarius, it would say anywhere but here. Sagittarius is continuously looking to get away from the life that it's, feels like it has to be living. And Pisces, being a Jupiter-ruled sign like Sagittarius, can be just as escapist oriented. But you get a little bit of that sort of bright, shiny object with Pisces and falling in love with the choice that wasn't made. So Pisces can be very hesitant about making a choice. It makes a choice and immediately longs for the thing that it didn't choose. And this can be a great conundrum for a Pisces. This can be something that really sits in the seat of its soul. A lot of these self-sabotaging tendencies can really be about Pisces working out what kind of life that they want to live. And like with the ocean, there's always an undercurrent. There's always something that's sort of dragging them down, and there's also something that's lifting them up and away. And this is the great dilemma. This is the great paradox that people born under Pisces live with. There is a tendency to have really dreamt the dream and been behind it, and then to suffer a setback or a failure and to give up on the dream. There is a tendency, as I said, to become enamored with the choice that wasn't made or the life that wasn't lived. But there can also be on the verge, when you're on the verge of getting something, it falling apart, or maybe even Pisces walking out on it. So it's hard to tell whether this stems from a fear of success, that if I get what I want, what am I going to do with myself afterwards, or is it a fear that your freedom is being taken away, that if I make this commitment, if I stay true to this pledge, then I'm losing out on all the other possibilities that could have been there. What's nice about Pluto in Aquarius is that it's going to introduce some rationale to these feelings. In other words, it's an air sign. So it's going to introduce trying to figure out what the reason is behind these things. Now, as a Pisces, you might recoil at that idea. It's like, don't take away my mystery. Don't take away my experience. Don't take away my Pisces. But the Aquarius isn't here to punish you. Aquarius isn't here to give you a hard time. Aquarius isn't here to make you feel ashamed or bad about your life. Aquarius is here to show you that the things that aren't working, all right? And you're not going to get to where you want to get by continuing with self-defeating or self-sabotaging patterns. It's going to want you to shine the light of truth down here. Like, why does this pattern keep happening? It's going to want to, Aquarius wants you to get more objective in the way that you reflect on these things. Aquarius is going to say, stop making yourself feel guilty or stop making yourself feel ashamed. Because sometimes guilt and shame can become defense mechanisms with the Piscean psyche. If I feel guilty or if I shame myself about this, I'm miserable, and so I'm just going to continue in this negative pattern. Aquarius is a zodiac sign that was very much associated with the Enlightenment, and that is basically shining a light in the dark corners. So as I said, Aquarius isn't going to be judgmental and saying, why do you do this to yourself in a sort of negative way? But it's like, let's look at other things that you can do. Let's look at how these patterns, you don't have to be shackled to these patterns. You don't have to be enslaved by these patterns. You can throw off the chains. You can stop the habitual repetition. And you can choose something new and different, and it can be fulfilling. And maybe it leads you to a broader perspective so that you enjoy the choice you made and the choice you didn't make. Okay, rather than feeling like you had to choose the choice you made and lose forever the choice that you didn't. Aquarius doesn't see life in terms of one way of doing things. It sees life as eclectic. It sees life as a tapestry. And so in that regard, this Aquarian energy, Pisces, can help you to get a sort of bird's eye view of things that you felt were set and could never be changed. And that you can make choices that actually work for you and don't cost you something in the end. That you can feel fulfillment, creativity, pleasure, and enjoyment in this world and feel less like you've been shipwrecked or abandoned on a planet that you don't understand. This broadening of the horizons, this acceptance of your pluses and your minuses, and you're working towards making choices that really benefit you, this is what Pluto in Aquarius has to give to you in your life right now. If you enjoyed what you saw, please press the like button. It helps more than you know. If you could subscribe, that would be wonderful. I've had such a wonderful time visiting with you this week, and I can't wait to get together next time on Christopher Renstrom Astrology.